And then 6 weeks in, I get hit with extreme nausea and vomiting. And I mean, puking up, like popping blood vessels in your face, peeing yourself, like calling the OB, and it was, no, this is normal, like you're fine, and this is normal morning sickness. And it was, how can this be normal? Like, this is not normal. I can't work, I can't function, I can't get out of bed, like this is not normal.
Welcome to the Birth Education Center podcast, hosted by myself, Care Messer, an entrepreneur, birth educator, and doula. My team and I want to help you discover your options in birth and postpartum, how to find your voice, and how to use that voice to navigate our maternal healthcare system. You and your baby are not just a number. This information includes doulas too. Now let's get started. I know I'm not allowed to say I'm excited for today's show, but we have a special guest coming in from Illinois who used to work here, live here, was one of our compadres. It is Jelina, and she's going to talk to us today about her two births and how her first birth got her into birth work. If you've been one of our students, you've seen Jelina make cameo appearances in a lot of our videos as the doula because she's very well missed because she was here for so long. Ashley, do you have anything to say about Jelina?
Jelina is one of my favorite people on the planet. We're going to talk to her more than once because there's so much that she can share about her journey, what she does, because not only she is an incredible doula, but also an incredible birth photographer. And watching her growth from her coming into a doula circle with her fat little potato baby that everybody was just like gushing over, and her being so excited and being like, I think I want to be a doula, and that's why I'm here. She had just done her training. And to blossoming into this incredible businesswoman, this incredible mom to two now. And I could not be more proud of her. I feel like my heart could burst when I talk about Jelina and what she's been to us. And I miss her desperately.
She's also one of those no fucks given people, and she's very direct, which is another reason that we all get along well. So today, let's talk about your first birth and your HG. Please explain what that is and how that all started.
So we were actively trying for our first, and we got pregnant 6 months into trying and then had a miscarriage. And then we got pregnant immediately after the miscarriage. It was, this is what we want. And then 6 weeks in, I get hit with extreme nausea and vomiting. And I mean, puking up, like popping blood vessels in your face, peeing yourself, like calling the OB, and it was like, no, this is normal, like you're fine, and this is normal morning sickness. And it was, how can this be normal? Like, this is not normal. I can't work, I can't function, I can't get out of bed, like this is not normal. And then I think it was 11 weeks. I had already lost my job at that point. I went to urgent care on a Monday and got fluids, and then was able to keep some things down because at that point nothing was really staying down. Like, I would drink a soda because I think that'll stay down, and then I would throw up the syrup. So my body would keep the water, and then I would throw the syrup up.
And were you losing weight at this point? Like, it was so bad that because you couldn't keep nutrition down, you were losing weight?
I wasn't at the point of losing weight, but I was also overweight. So the OB was like, if you lose weight, that's fine. And I'm like, you're fucking kidding, right? Like, just because I'm fat, you're going to say, that's okay, you can starve yourself. Then I went back to urgent care that Thursday, so 4 days later, because I was dehydrated again, ended up getting the same doctor, and she's like, yeah, this is HG. Like, what is your OB doing? I'm going to call your OB, and you're going to get on Zofran. And it took a few weeks to figure out the dosage of Zofran. I had to be on the max dose. Like clockwork. I could feel when it was the end of a dose. And then I was on it literally the whole fucking time.
And you lost your job because you couldn't work. Like, they didn't fire you because you just were like, I can't come in, I'm done.
Yeah, I tried to come in once when they had threatened, if you don't come in, you can't work here anymore. So I tried to go in, and then I ended up puking in my trash can underneath my desk and peeing myself. So I was like, yeah, this isn't going to work. Sorry.
And what did the Zofran do for you? Did it keep you feeling, as long as you kept your doses up, feeling normal, or were you
No.
still sick even on the Zofran, just not dying?
Essentially that. Like, if I talked too much, I got nauseous. If I did too much, I was useless. Like, I was still nauseous. And then if I didn't listen to that, like, hey, you're doing too much, you need to lay down, then I would start throwing up again. So it was, Zofran just prevented me from going to the hospital.
I've had several moms who've had HG, and they're so miserable and they're so angry about being pregnant. It's so hard to find joyful moments because everything about their body hurts. They're jittery, they're anxious, they just can't have, their focus is only on, I hope I don't throw up, I hope I don't throw up, oh my God, I feel so sick. And they feel like they lost out on their whole entire pregnancy.
All of it.
Yeah. Like you feel like you're in survival mode rather than getting to enjoy being pregnant. And especially when it's something you wanted, it's such a crazy feeling to go from, we want this baby, we tried for so long to have this baby, to get this baby out of me.
I think in about 7 or 8 weeks, there was one morning before my husband Sam was going to work that I remember throwing up in the toilet and peeing myself and yelling into the toilet bowl, make this stop. I'm done. I can't do this.
Well, so you go through that for the full 9 months, which is horrific. And anybody that has HG or has had HG and says, I'm never doing this again, I don't want any more babies, we all understand, and there is no judgment passed because it is hard. It's probably the hardest thing you can go through when you're pregnant. How did the ending of, I'm sure you were super excited to get that little boy out, but how did that affect your labor, your birth, all that kind of stuff? Like, tell us how your first birth went.
Oh man, it was a very typical run-of-the-mill medicalized birth. And I don't mean that in a negative way. It's just what your average American experiences at the hospital. We did the hospital birth classes, we checked all the things off of your Pinterest like checklists, and it was like, this is everything you need for the nursery, this is what you need for your hospital bag. And I had prodromal labor starting at probably about 37 weeks. It wasn't too bad, but I know dehydration was a part of it. Irritable uterus, as they liked to call it. And then when my contractions actually started and shifted, they were double and triple peaking because he was asynclitic, because he was all cattywampus in my pelvis, which makes sense because I wasn't moving. I wasn't active. I wasn't doing anything. We went in because I'm like, why are these lasting 5 minutes? What is going on? I don't remember this from birth class. And they were like, hey, we can't get a good read on his heart rate. We're going to keep you. And it was like, okay. So they hooked me up to Pitocin at 11 p.m. that night. I was 3 centimeters.
And what were they hoping with the Pitocin if they were already 5 minutes long? Were they hoping Pitocin would get it more regular, or what did they say? We just have to get the baby out, so we're going to push through?
Honestly, I don't remember. I just remember being like, oh, okay, we need Pitocin to have a baby. Like, okay.
Just no information. Just this is what we're going to do with no pathway. I mean,
like, of course, like, we're all doulas now, right? But any of us in that situation would be like, okay, let's just have a baby. But at the same time, now in my doula brain, I'm like, okay, so the baby doesn't like what's happening, and you're having 5 minute long contractions. Let's have more. Let's do more of that, and things will go great, right? Because at the end of the day, they know that if they step on the gas and things don't go well, they can just take the baby out, right? So to them, there's no harm, no foul. But of course, if things had gone completely sideways, you would have been left to deal with the consequences of that, right? Yep. So it's just, hindsight is always interesting when we're looking back at our births, at our friends' births. It's just kind of like, what'd you think about that? Oh, okay. Let's give a baby that's not happy Pitocin. Let's see how that goes.
Oh, it gets better. It gets better, Ashley.
Oh, I can't wait.
Oh, yeah. Because at 11 a.m., 12 hours later, they checked me and they're like, oh, you're 4 centimeters. Let's break your water. And I remember pushing back at that point. I'm like, why? What's that going to do? I'm 4 centimeters. Like, so I knew, my intuition was already like, no. Like, why? What does that do? And the nurse that I had was not comfortable with physiological birth, unmedicated birth. And 2, provided 0 recommendations to kind of get labor going. Like, hey, you can sit on the birth ball next to your bed. Hey, you can walk around in this little like 6-foot section or whatever. Because I don't think at that time they had the wireless monitors.
No, I'm sure they didn't.
No, intermittent monitoring wasn't like super popular then. And I was also fat, so.
Well, and how are they managing your HG at this point?
Zofran, injectable Zofran. Yeah, through the IV. And then she kind of steamrolled me. She's like, well, why don't you want to listen to the doctor? That's what they're recommending. This is what you should do. This is what is going to help speed your labor up and this and that. And so I finally caved and I was like, fine, okay, let's break my water. They broke my water at 12. And before that, I'm getting ahead of myself. Before that, they ended up coming in and turning the pit down because my contractions were a minute apart. It was too much.
Shocking.
Yeah. And then it was like, okay, let's break your waters. So they broke my water and I was literally just flung against a brick wall at 100 miles an hour. I love my husband, love him to death, but he was fucking useless. Absolutely fucking useless.
Oh my God, I've been waiting for so long to hear what you're going to say.
Yeah.
Oh, man.
This motherfucker slept on the bench or sat in a chair next to my head. And he's heard me, like, we're still married. We're still married.
And from how I know him, that's just his personality. He would be like tapping out and that's, and he's the sweetest man ever. So yeah, but
if you ever follow Jelina on social media, she does these series where she puts items in her house and sees how long it takes her husband to realize that they're there. So his memory's not great. His awareness of what's taking place around him, not great. And so literally, if you follow her for nothing else, follow her for the Sam Has No Idea What's Going On series that she does.
No slam on Sam. We love Sam.
Yeah.
But we're not surprised. Literally in the least. I just was waiting with bated breath how you were going to present.
Yeah. How I was going to throw him under the bus. Yeah.
I love it. I love it. I'm here for it.
But so he was fucking useless. And as I'm essentially getting hit with these contractions, he was holding my hand and trying to, I'm here, like, in his way that he was trying to be supportive, but not knowing what to do and nothing happening. The coercive nurse came in and was like, just get the epidural. That's fine. Just do it. You can just get the epidural and it'll go away. You'll be fine. So I caved and got the epidural and then had windows of pain. So the epidural didn't completely work anyways. And
when you say windows of pain, can you explain that to our audience so they understand what that means?
It's essentially breakthrough pain where for some reason the numbing of the epidural, which is based on gravity, for some reason just doesn't work in a spot. And there was like a window of pain literally on the left side of my belly that it was just there. And was still super nauseous and miserable this whole time. 7 p.m. they checked and I was like 7 or 8 centimeters. And then I was, hey, I have to poop at like 8:30. And of course, as birth workers, we're like, you have to poop?
Yes.
We understand that's code for there's a baby on my ass.
Well, and especially when you're on Zofran and you haven't pooped in like 2 weeks.
It's,
it's not actually poop, right?
No.
For sure.
So it was like, okay, what's going on? I have to poop because I don't eat enough to actually poop. So what's happening? And they're like, oh, you're fine. Like, you're fine. And I'm like, no, really, what's going on? So they check me and they're like, oh, you're 10 centimeters. Okay. And at this point, I don't think he was even at like -1 or 0 station. Or if he was at -1. But shortly before that, I had felt him drop and get into position. And then they had me start pushing at 8:45. And then I essentially vomited him out. I just threw up and vomited him out.
I've had a few clients do that, unfortunately. I have very visceral memories of...
Yeah.
It's hard.
And I tell my clients, it sucks, but it's really effective pushing. I'm sorry, but you're like, it's working.
Yeah. The only downside is I did have one where it was like she couldn't stop throwing up long enough to like slow down at all, you know? So
Oh,
it's like
yeah.
a rocket ship, basically, a vomit-powered rocket ship
Yeah.
for the baby to come out.
In my case, like as a first timer, I pushed for 45 minutes and I'll get into it, but he had a big ass head. So
That's what
like,
I was going to say. I was like, it doesn't matter what station he was at, that big
no,
old potato head, you felt
had a,
it as soon
he
as
had
you
a
were 10
big ass
centimeters.
And there was a nurse, my nurse, as I was pushing, and of course, being a first timer, she's like, I'm gonna go on my 15-minute break or something like that. Don't have a baby without me. Like, I'll be back.
Because that's what we do. We wait for our nurses to come back off their break.
And it's like, her name was Lauren, and she was absolutely amazing. I fucking love her. But she was actually the reason I became a doula. And it was, okay, that's fine. Like, I'm good. And so this new nurse is coming in and I'm fucking throwing up everywhere and vomiting and pushing. And she's like, okay, stop. Baby's head is right here. We got to call the doctor. And I can't, I have to push. And this is the fetal ejection response kicked in. Yeah, I have to push. Like, get your fucking hand. Cause she was holding Killian's head.
No.
I was just going to say, how quickly did the HG resolve itself?
Oh, fucking immediately. Like, once that placenta came out, it was like a fog lifted. And I'm like, give me fucking food. I want food. And they're like, I think he was born at 9:33. So they're like, everything's closed. We have a vending machine sandwich that we can give you. And I'm like, I don't care. Give me it. And I ate it, and I think it was like a dry turkey sandwich on like white bread, and it was the best thing I had ever eaten.
So you had your baby at one of the busiest hospitals in San Diego, and the labor and delivery experience sounds about right on track with that and what you'd expect. But can you talk a little bit about how postpartum went, how your postpartum care was, that recovery part in that like big hospital system?
It was okay. There wasn't much help other than what they needed to do to check off their boxes. So there were a whole bunch of things that I didn't know I needed to do, and like, babies don't regulate their temperature. If they're too cold and you overbundle them, like, they'll overheat, which is what happened. And I had a nurse just yell at me of being like, your baby's too hot, undress them. And it was, okay, what do I do? Are you going to tell me, or are you just going to yell at me and then walk out of the room? Which is what she did. So it was lack of sleep. I mean, they were coming in every hour, 2 hours just to check off their list. And then it was have fun.
Yeah, good luck. Enjoy, keep it alive. Yeah, I feel like that's the part that when families go in to have babies in hospitals, especially really big, busy hospitals, that's the part they don't really think about. And then I have families come back and be like, we wouldn't give birth there because of how we were treated postpartum. We were ignored. We didn't know how to take care of a baby. And so it's just something I always want parents to think about, that it's like, yeah, the doctors are there to help you have your baby. And that is probably, you're choosing it because it's what feels safe to you. But then a lot of times you're on your own postpartum because they're so busy. There's so many people giving birth there. There's so few nurses, and you don't see your doctor again like ever when you're in a big hospital like that. So,
well, and we so focus on the birth part. We don't take a newborn care class because we just don't have time for it. We're like, I can figure out a diaper. But especially an out-of-hospital newborn care class, so different than an in-hospital care class. I remember going to one and I was like, I know more about babysitting than I was just taught, when I was pregnant. And which is why we really have tried to boost up our class with all the things that we don't even think about studying. We need to study newborns. We need to understand their nervous system and how they regulate with us. We need to understand all of that because we don't have that kind of support right after birth in the big system. So it is our responsibility as parents to get that, because they don't have the time. It's not that they're evil. They don't have the time, and they don't know what you don't know. How do they go over that? When they're checking their boxes, they've got a whole bunch of rooms they're trying to cover. So yeah, really, please get some outside education when it comes to how to take care of a newborn and what newborns are like, because they're not just itty bitty humans. There's a lot to it.
Yeah. I mean, the vast majority of us have never spent time with an actual newborn when it's our first baby. It's like, even if we babysat, I ran an infant center at a preschool, but the youngest babies I would get were 6 to 8 weeks old. a fresh baby is not a 6 to 8 week old. And so I was out of my depth. And I just think about these places that are, we deliver so many babies. We specialize in birthing babies, that these big hospital systems where there's just so many people having babies. But then afterwards, it's too many people for them to give like adequate support and care to. And you end up going home feeling very like, oh shit, what do we do now?
Is in San Diego, is it still after a vaginal delivery, is it still a 2-day in-hospital stay, typically?
Well, some places is 24 hours.
Yeah, and I think it's not only dependent on their insurance, but if they're really busy, they're like trying to get them out. Because I've had some moms who needed more time, but they were like, it was a full moon or whatever it was, or lots of inductions, and they had to leave early, even though they didn't want to.
Yeah, and I feel like for potentially second, third time parents, 24 hours might be sufficient because they've done that dance before. But when I see places really pushing to get first time parents out after 24 hours, it's kind of like, gosh, what's falling through the cracks? Like, how are we really assessing their mental health, the baby's health? Like, our test results haven't even come back yet. How are we sure that everything's good to go in a 24-hour period? And it's such a balance, right? Because we want to be bonding and we want to be left alone and we want quiet and all that stuff. But I think that if we're going to have our babies in hospitals, there's an important role that the hospital needs to play and take on in preparing you for taking this baby home, keeping them safe.
Especially if they're going to hardcore promote their classes, that it's like, okay, then you need to cover everything before you push these people out off a cliff.
Yeah, exactly.
I would also prefer that they be evidence-based classes, because there's a lot more evidential studies, etc., about babies' development than there was when those were written back in the 70s. Just saying. Jelina, how did that birth experience pump you over within 5 months to getting your doula training? Like, what was it that you said, I got to do this thing? Tell us about the nurse that helped you.
Yeah, that's a really like fast turnaround with a newborn to turn around and become a doula like immediately.
I mean, I had wanted a doula for his birth, but cost was prohibitive for us. And had lost my job because I had graduated college in 2015 and had him in 2017. So I was still like the beginning stages of the career, so to speak, and started looking into doula stuff. And it was, no, I want that. Like that nurse at the end of his birth, Lauren, the 2 hours before he was born and the 2 hours after he was born, she was a fucking angel. She was so validating and so caring and so like, you're doing this. Not once were any of the other nurses even remotely warm. And so it was one of those, how can we have those 4 hours that I experienced the whole fucking time? Like, how can we make birth a positive experience? And so I started going down the rabbit hole. He was born the beginning of July, and I signed up for doula training in Halloween, and then it was the beginning of January that following year is when I did my first doula training, and then I fully went into the fucking deep end.
It was our second vision board doula circle. We held 2 because the first one was so full and so popular that we held a second one, and Jelina came in with a couple other doulas that were new at the time, and that group of doulas revolutionized the Birth Education Center. Our doula series rocked our worlds on levels we cannot even begin to describe.
Yep.
I have such core memories from meeting you and the other doulas who came in that night, and just like the excitement, the hunger that you had, your fat little baby, and just like you changed everything from how we taught our doula series to our friendships, like our relationships, the beautiful things have blossomed. I mean, on another level. So
yep.
I will never forget that, your smiling face walking in with your fat baby and spending those 3, 4, 5, 6 hours making vision boards and talking and eating and all of that.
It's one of those things in community, at least here, it doesn't matter what you look like, where you come from, what trauma you have, what triumphs you have. The community here is flippin' phenomenal. And I know it's not like that everywhere, and I encourage it to be that way everywhere because we all need each other. And we've had doulas come through where their doula trainer said, you can't have purple hair. You got to hide those tattoos. You can't wear nails. And they come into doula training like paranoid about, I can't be me. And I'm like, oh yeah, you can be you. There's always someone that's going to love you for you, and you need to love you for you. So that's not the case. All of us are different in our own special ways. And yeah, I think just as a community, we need to be accepting, loving with no competition, because that's how real birth work is.
Yep. There's enough babies for everybody.
So you jumped into birth work and became a doula, like full force, jumped in with both feet. And then you decided to add more skills to your resume. And now you practice more than just doula work. So can you talk about what your business looks like now, today?
Oh gosh. So my first doula training was that January. February, I did a placenta encapsulation certification. March, I did a birth and bereavement training and certification. May, I photographed my first bereavement baby, which kind of catapulted me into the photography side because it was like, hey, I really enjoy this and I'm kind of good at it. And then it just took off from there. So I focus right now as a doulatog, as a doula and birth photographer combined. Did that for probably 2 years or so, and then added in videography. So I do birth and bereavement, everything. And that's kind of where I'm sitting at right now and loving it.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have Jelina back on specifically to talk about what it means to be a doulatog. But I want to talk about how, even though you were in birth work, I know and I remember these conversations so vividly going around with you, because it comes up, right? When doulas have kids, and especially when they only have one kid, it's like, are you going to have another one? When are you going to have another one? And I know, and I was always very protective of you in that way of, I don't know if I can. I don't know if I can go through another HD pregnancy. And I remember I would always get a little bit like kind of cagey with people who were very pushy with you about having another baby. As much as I wanted you to have another baby and another little potato, I was like, there's no guarantee that that another pregnancy will not be so terrible for you. And now you have this little boy that needs you and needs you to be as healthy as they can be. So can you talk about sort of your journey to deciding to have another child or not deciding to have another child, and then kind of what that pregnancy looked like once you were in it?
It was difficult because the we had wanted 2 babies, and then shortly after our first was born, it was, I can't do this again. I can't. And my husband was on board. He was like, okay, we'll only have one. And then as time went on, it was, okay, well, we'll wait until he's more independent and he can do things himself, and then I can just go die on the couch. Because that, unfortunately, is potentiality. I can't think of the word. While I was pregnant with my first, there were 2 people in the HG group that I was in on Facebook that died from organ failure because they were so dehydrated, because doctors were like, it's morning sickness, you're fine. So HG is still a serious medical issue in pregnancy. It's definitely gotten more exposure and light now, but at that time was still just ignored.
And this is one of the reasons I want people to share this episode with anyone who is experiencing a lot of morning sickness, because it can get so out of control right away and they are brushed off. And they shouldn't be. We have to be our own best advocate. And it is true, the squeaky wheel, the one who goes in the emergency room every 3 minutes, is usually the one that finally gets somebody to listen to them. And it's important that this is shared information because people don't talk about it.
Well, and then let's add on the misogynistic nature of this world, of our medical system, the country that we live in, that is, we're just hysterical, right? We're exaggerating, we're dramatic. It's been proven over and over and over again. All the studies show that doctors do not take women's pain seriously. They don't take people who don't fall within gender norms pain seriously, right? Basically, unless you are a cis straight man, they don't take your pain seriously. So you literally get brushed off across the board for everything. And so when you're like, I literally can't keep anything down, of course they're going to just be, oh yeah, you have morning sickness. Like everybody has morning sickness.
The second time that I went to urgent care and they have you pee in the cup and everything, they literally told me that I wasn't dehydrated enough for fluids. And I'm like, what do you mean? I haven't drank anything in 24 hours. Like, I'm literally following the directions that you're telling pregnant people that if you haven't drank anything in 24 hours to go to urgent care and get fluids. They're like, well, your pee you're not dehydrated enough. And I'm like, I don't fucking care. Give me fluids.
It's so frustrating. So I could see how when you're thinking about having another child, it's like my physical well-being, but also am I looking forward to another pregnancy of just constantly having to fight and battle to live, to exist, to continue to exist on this planet, that every corner I turn is going to be a fight to get what I need and what this baby needs.
And then you've got a toddler to think about. Jelina, that was
yes.
We talked about that for 5 years. Should I not? And it is a big deal. So any family that's going through that, it's a big deal. And you need a lot of support if you're going to try that second time.
100%. And it was shortly before COVID, we had made the decision to move out of California because it's too expensive here. Like, we did decide to have another baby, but it was, okay, we're going to move and we're going to start trying afterwards. And things kept getting delayed. And then in 2023, we finally were like, okay, no, we're moving. Let's go. So we had planned for a second, but it was after we had moved and we were settled. And then our second decided to show up early. I like to call her our planned oops. And our first was a little over 5.5 that time at that point. So it was one of those, if I have HG again, oh fuck, like we're supposed to be moving cross country when I think it was 21 weeks. I told our second, I said, if you're going to stick around, you can't fucking give me HG. Like if I'm going to have HG for this pregnancy, you can leave and come back, please. And I didn't have HG. And it was crazy because it was a unicorn pregnancy, essentially. If you have HG, you typically have an 80 to 90% chance of reoccurrence for HG in subsequent pregnancies, and they typically get worse. So if you had pretty bad HG, it's going to be worse. So that's what we were expecting, and it was mind-blowing experiencing a normal pregnancy, experiencing hey, I'm nauseous, I'm going to eat a cracker, I feel better. Like,
I completely forgot that your move was like in the middle of your pregnancy.
And not only that, but I packed, boxed up, loaded a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house by myself with a 5-year-old and pregnant.
Oh yeah, because you sent Sam ahead, right?
Yeah, because he left and went ahead.
Whew. Yeah.
So I was by myself from the middle of July to the end of September of 2023.
Wow. Thank you, Declan, for your normal pregnancy.
Thank you. I mean, it was a night and day difference. It was her pregnancy, even though I took the Unisomin B6, which worked for her. It didn't work for the first until about 22 weeks. I think it was like a week or two after we had moved to Illinois that I finally stopped taking it. But it was, I see why people have so many babies now. Like, this is fantastic. It was a very enjoyable pregnancy. And because it was so night and day from my first, it gave me anxiety because I was waiting for that shoe to drop of like, this hashtag drama. This is too good to be true. I'm not supposed to have easy pregnancy, so to speak. Like, 1 is a fat person. 2 is a person who had HG before. And it was fantastic. And then 36 weeks on the dot happened and horrific prodromal labor started.
Well, let me back you up a little bit, Jelina, because you chose home birth this time instead of birthing in a hospital. And was that because you were a doula, or was that because you just wanted a different experience?
I think it was a bit of both. And I remember early on in my doula career, telling Sam, my husband, that if we have another one, I'm not going to the hospital unless it's absolutely medically necessary. And he looked at me and he was like, well, but no, you have babies in a hospital. And I was like, why? And we fought about it a little bit. And I told him, I said, if you truly want me to have a baby in a hospital, I was like, I'll agree to it. But then I'm either not getting off the toilet at home and we're having a baby unassisted at home, or you're going to catch a baby in a car on the way to the hospital.
So either way, I'm getting my way because it's my body and my birth, and you can choose if it's panic-stricken or calm.
And he was like, okay, we can have a medical professional at home for home birth. And I was like, there you go. There you go. And so the more I worked, the more he became educated through me, because I would come home and talk about everything, whether he wanted to hear it or not. And he was on board with a home birth towards, I don't want to say towards the end of the pregnancy, but from the beginning, he was like, okay, this is what you want. I trust you. I trust your education. This is what you do for a living. Like, let's do it. And I had told him, like, if there's a medical necessity, I will go to the hospital. Like, only if it's medically necessary, because that's what hospitals are for. So yeah, I had a midwife, California, and then Illinois. Only recently, I think it was 2 years ago, year and a half ago, just passed a law allowing CPMs, just licensed midwives. Before
it was illegal for a long time. I've had a few clients that came from Illinois that were like, home birth is not legal or illegal, but like if it happens, it will not be good.
You could only, CNMs were the only ones approved. So outside of Chicago, there were four CNMs that served all of central Illinois, and that was it. And it's still essentially like that, because people who are going to be CPMs and LMs, licensed midwives, are still in school right now. So things are going to start changing for the better, amazingly, in 1, 2, 3 years for Illinois shortly. And I'm so excited for it. So I found my midwife in Illinois, and we just waited. Like, it was, I moved it, I think I got to Illinois at like 21 weeks. And then 36 weeks on the dot, thought I was in labor. And in Illinois, you can have a home birth, as long as your midwife's comfortable with it, starting at 36 weeks. And some midwives are comfortable letting people go up to like 43 weeks, potentially over 43 weeks. But yeah, had really bad prodromal labor, starting at 36 weeks. Thought I was going to have an early baby. And I was like, okay, what's going on? Didn't have a birth pool, was just going to use my bathtub. And then I lost my mucus plug at 37 weeks. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay, things are happening. And it was like a mucus plug. Like, so I'm like, okay, shit's going to happen soon. And then it didn't. And then 38 weeks rolled around, and I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And I'm doing all the spinning babies things. I'm doing the daily, like, everything. And
as doulas, sometimes we're way more impatient, even though we know all the things, because we know all the things.
We know too much.
Yeah, we know too much.
And then it gets in your head, and like, I was talking to my doula every day. And for this birth, I had 2 doulas, because I knew that Sam was fucking useless. It was, I'm going to have a doula.
Poor Sam.
And then if you need a doula, we're going to have a doula. Like, so I had 2 doulas. It was rough. And so I had Killian at 38 and 6. And at 39 and 2, I started losing my mucus plug again. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, why is there so much?
Why did it grow back?
Yes! And I was like, I'm late. Like, this is late in pregnancy. It's not supposed to grow back, but it does. It can.
Not to mention you were the most pregnant you'd ever been, because you didn't make it to 39 weeks with Killian.
No,
so it's like,
I knew I wasn't going to make it to my due date again. Just intuition. I was born at 37 weeks. Sam was born at 36 weeks. Killian was born at almost 39 weeks. Like, didn't think I would. So it was like, okay, what the fuck's going on? But 39 and 2, started losing my mucus plug again. And This whole time I'm having prodromal labor. This whole time I'm contracting. And they were painful. I'm calling my doula in the middle of the night and she's talking to me through these contractions. She's like, I know, it's fake. It's not fake, but like, you're not going to have a baby right now. Like, you're fine. I know you're not fine, but you're fine. Like,
yeah. This is terrible. Keep going.
Yes. Like, you're doing it. Good job. Just let it happen.
And I'm so glad you had a doula to do that, because when we don't have a doula, we go crazy because our partners don't know how to help us. And we just need to be talked off that ledge sometimes several times because it's so frustrating.
So the whole time, my husband was so thankful for my doula because he's like, I'm so glad that she's talking you off all of these ledges because I don't know what to do. So I noticed at 39 and 3, going to bed that night, losing more mucus plug, that they were about 10 minutes apart. And I'm like, they're not that bad. Like, they've been less than all of the prodromal labor so far. Woke up the next morning. They were probably still about 9 or 10 minutes apart. I think 1 or 2 might have woken me up in the middle of the night, but I fell back asleep. I was like, that's fine, whatever. I remember texting my doula and being like, I don't want Sam to leave and go to work. Like, should I keep him home? And she was like, no, he's fine. He's 15 minutes away. I'm 20 minutes away. You're fine. And my biggest fear the whole pregnancy was being alone giving birth, because I had this feeling that it was going to be quick. My doula had the feeling it was going to be quick. And she was like, take a nap today. Like, was talking to her throughout the day. Took a nap with my first, Killian, at like 12 p.m. I think I woke up at 2 p.m. and started working on business stuff, creating a workshop and whatnot. And I was texting my doula like, hey, they're like 7 minutes apart now. I don't know what's going on. I kind of sort of have to breathe through them, but they're really mild. Like,
man, second babies, when they decide to shift, like you're thinking 7 minutes, what's the big deal? Because it's a second baby. That's why. Because and we know.
Like, when do you want me to call you? Like, what time do you want to come over? I don't know if this is real. Like, they don't hurt. Like, what's going on? I think this was like 3:45 or so. And she was like, well, call your midwife and just keep her updated. And I was like, okay. And she's like, and then remember, when you call your midwife, call me. So I'm like, okay, I can do that. Called my midwife at like 3:51 or something. And my contractions on the phone shifted to 4 minutes apart. And I realized, because I had told her, I was like, hey, they're about 7 minutes apart right now. Like, I have to breathe through them, but they're not, like, they're not painful. They're easier than what I've been experiencing. And she's like, okay, just keep me updated. That's fine. And when I got off the phone, I realized, oh, that's a 4 minute apart contraction. That was at 3:51. Got off the phone at like 3:57. And at 4:01, my water broke. And I mean, movie status, damn, in my bed, fucking wave, like.
My favorite part is that you know precisely the minute you called, precisely the minute you hung up, and precisely we're so doulas, man.
As we're talking about your birth story, I was like, oh my God, the down to the minute details is the most Jelina thing I've ever seen in my life.
Very, very type A in my personal, non-professional life. Like, so my water broke at 4:01, and I remember standing next to my bed, and Killian's like running around in the room. I have 3 dogs, so they're like doing things, and I'm like, what do I do? Of course, being a doula, like, everything goes out the window when labor starts. Like, it doesn't matter if you're a doula or whatever, like, shit just goes out the window. And I remember running to the bathroom and telling my son to get the puppy pads because my water broke, and he's like, Mom, what does this mean? And I'm like, well, bud, baby's coming. And he was like, okay. And like, ran off. And I'm like, no, like, give me the puppy pad. So it was a shit show. Called everybody, called Sam. So contractions started back up at 4:15. And the reason I know that they started at 4:15 was because I was looking at my phone. 4:15 happened. Another one started at 4:17. Another one started at 4:19. I'm like, they're 2 minutes apart. And at that point, I started vocalizing. And I'm like, fuck! No one's gonna be here! It's happening! So things started very, very quickly, very intensely after my water broke. people started showing up. I think my midwife got there at 4:30. I think my first doula got there at 4:40.
I mean, they weren't that far away, so thank goodness they were showing up. I know in your brain it was going, train fast, but
yeah,
they were already on their way.
My midwife thankfully lived, I think, 11 minutes from my house. Got in the shower at 4:50. My second doula showed up shortly after 5. No time to fill the bathtub. Started pushing at 5:10, and Declan was born at 5:27. Real fast birth. 87 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. And she was born with a nuchal hand, so there's photos with, you can see her knuckles, and her cord was wrapped 5 times. Yeah.
And those are the babies that come really fast because they know their air supply.
Yep. And I remember thinking right before she was born, as my midwife was using the Doppler, that her heart rate was low. And I was like, okay. And of course, at that time, I'm like, no one's telling me she's okay. And we didn't know she was a she, team green. But it was like, no one's telling me my baby's okay. What's going on? I hear D-cells, like doula brain was kicking in because there was no endorphins happening. I was completely cognizant the whole time. So yeah, it was intense. It was really, really fucking intense.
Were you able to have her in the water in your bathtub?
No,
Did you have a water birth? Just your bathtub, no water. She's like, there's no time, guys. I'm flying out. Just ready.
And I live in an 87-year-old house, so hot water was done right before I started pushing. So
even though it was fast, furious, all the things, and I have seen the pictures and I heard the story right after it happened, what's the difference between last birth and this birth? Between the pregnancy, obviously no HG, but was it worth it? Are you glad you did the home birth and had her the way you wanted to have her?
Oh yeah. And it took me a while to process her birth afterwards because it was so quick. Because it took a long time for my brain to catch up to what my body was doing. Like my hormones and all the endorphins didn't kick in until like 8 or 8:30 p.m. that night. And that's when I got the birth high. But it was 100% I would do it again. Not necessarily like the care or anything, but just the experience of not having to get in a car and drive to a hospital, not having to be in a sterile environment and being in my own home. And then the walk from my bathtub to my own bed and sleeping in my own bed, 100% worth it.
It's just amazing, like that. How harrowing your pregnancy was with Killian, and then how sort of sterile and medical your birth was. Declan really brought, she was literally like, I'm going to come in. I'm going to make this pregnancy tolerable for you. And the birth is going to be a whirlwind. She's a little bit of a bull in a china shop vibe.
Just like her mama.
But still, yeah, exactly. I mean, 100%. But still being like, we're still going to do this, even though it's fast and furious, right? We're still going to do this at home. I'm going to come out at home. I'm going to be okay. I know how long this birth needs to be for me to get here okay. I mean, talk about the prodromal labor. What do we think she was doing in there? Getting herself in a safe position to be born with a 5-time nuchal cord.
And getting that cervix loose and down and thin.
Loosey-goosey. Yep. I mean, it all, in hindsight, it all makes sense, right? You can see the pieces fall into place and be like, yeah, duh. Of course. That's literally why all of that happened.
I think it was like 2 nights before labor actually started. I was talking to Sam and I was like, she knows something that we don't. I don't know if she's asynclitic. I don't know if she has a short cord, which she does because it was wrapped 5 times. When it was unwrapped, it was a nice, long, beautiful cord. But I had called it right before her birth. I was like, she knows something we don't.
They always do.
Yep.
One of the things I think when people say, and I have a student in class right now saying the same thing, I wanted a home birth so bad for my first, but I thought, let's just do it safely at the hospital. I think my first one should be at the hospital just in case. And she said, I've regretted that decision every step of the way because I know what can happen there when I really trust birth and I trust my body, and I'm mad that we didn't plan for it and just do what I knew inside I should do. And so we've had to do a lot of fear release work on the hospital, the system, and all of that, staying home longer in labor, getting a doula, whatever, understanding that you can still have a beautiful birth in the hospital. It's just going to look a little different. You know, the four walls don't matter. And just like your birth, it was fast and furious. It could have happened in the hospital just as easily as at home. But at home, we're so used to seeing normal birth that we trust the body and the baby to do what they need to do. And, you know, when you have a good care team, it really can be everything that you want it to be. And I know we don't think about that for home births on first-time moms. We're too nervous, too scared. I was too, but I also didn't know that at the birth center, they had the exact same equipment that the home births would have had, and I wouldn't have had to drive in the car, you know?
Yeah. And for Declan's birth, my midwife, the only time she ever touched me until Declan's head was out and realized, like, oh, there's lots of cord there, was a Doppler. Not once. I didn't get cervical checks. There was no IV pokes. There was no blood pressure cuff. Like, it was, you're doing your thing. You're healthy. Like, have a baby.
They're more like they're there if you need them, which is really what the role of the medical provider should be in physiological birth in the hospital as well. It's kind of a stand back and allow things to happen in expectant management that we call it, rather than actively trying to manage, fix, tweak. You know, I try to tell families, like, there aren't like buttons to push and switches to flip and all of that. You can't make birth happen. It doesn't work like that. And so when we see providers who can just sit back, sit on their hands, which we know OBs who can do that, we know midwives who can do that, and just allow things to unfold, the vast majority of the time, everyone's going to be okay, right? And they know they can look down the road. Providers who can do expectant management and really sit back and watch, they're not just sitting back being like, I don't wonder what's going to happen next. They're looking down the road, and they're able to do that because they're not so in the moment trying to tweak everything. They're able to look ahead and keep an eye out for pitfalls, for things that might come up, for issues that might happen. They're always thinking about what's down the road. It's not that they're not doing anything. It's that they're able to really see the full scope of everything rather than thinking about what do I need to do right now to make this baby come out. And I think that's really one of the downfalls of that active management, where you're constantly trying to tweak and control and manipulate the birth process, that you're not actually looking ahead at where things could go wrong or what complications there could be. And that's where things can get really hairy. So yeah, I love that. No touching, sitting back, letting things unfold.
Bit more of a peaceful birth that way. What advice would you give to anybody experiencing a high-risk pregnancy, first-time pregnancy, with special complications, special circumstances? Because it is a big deal not only to have that kind of a pregnancy and experience trauma, but then deciding to do a second pregnancy. What advice would you share with them?
One, you have to do what is right for your family. Whether or not it's another pregnancy is completely a personal choice. I think if you do choose to have another pregnancy, to find a care provider that is going to listen to you. Because it's one thing to have a high-risk pregnancy, but it's another thing to be completely fucking ignored. So it's do your research before you even get pregnant. Do your research, have a game plan, join Facebook groups. There are HG specific knowledgeable care providers all over the country technically, but wherever you're at, find a care provider who is going to listen to you and support and have aggressive treatment, especially for HG in the beginning, of setting up weekly infusions or infusions twice a week. Most care providers are with the whole Zofran thing, they used to think that it caused issues in the beginning of pregnancy, and that's been debunked. So it's knowing that and being like, no, I need Zofran, or I need Diclegis, or I need whatever you need. Actually finding a care provider that is supportive. And that kind of leads into if you're having a home birth, wherever you're birthing, it doesn't matter. Have a birth team that you connect with, that listens to you and that supports you 100% completely. Because your care team can make or break your birth 100%.
It really can. And I think a lot of times we just think everybody knows what they're doing, so I'm just going to trust it blankly. And that's can lead to a lot of stuff. Everyone's an individual, and we have to have people that we connect with and know how to advocate for ourselves when that connection is a little skewed.
Yeah. Yep.
Thank you for that. Thank you for sharing your story today. And I'm excited for our next episode with you because we are going to talk about birth photography, business, starting your doula business from scratch again when you move. Jelina really knows the ins and outs of building a business and figuring out all the things and doing the SEO and building their website and all those things that doulas are so intimidated by. And one of the things that Jelina and I relate on is you can learn anything. And there's a way to learn anything, and then you just have to implement it. And probably because both of us are so type A, we get really excited.
Stubborn.
And that we don't take no for an answer, and we figure it out even when there's lots of no's in our faces. And I think that's why it works. So that will be our next episode with you in a little bit. And thank you for coming today.
I love you guys.
All right, we'll see you next week.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us today. And remember, it's your body, your choice, and finding your voice is your power. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow us in all the places, and go to BirthEducationCenter.com for our blog and more online education classes. And we'll see you next week.